Welcome to Bad Ideas, the show where we look at misfires, mistakes, and miscalculations from all throughout history.
I'm Tony Southcott.
And I'm Albert Berg, and the bad idea we're talking about is from very recent history, Tony. We're going to go back to the year 2000s and talk about something called the CueCat.
Oh, really? But is this like something that helps you in lines? What is it?
That's a good starting point. We need to discuss how this is spelled. In case people want to Google this for themselves, it's C-U-E, like a pool cue, and then cat, like you would normally spell a cat. And in front of the C-U-E, if you want to be real professional and get it right, Tony, they had a colon.
Is that supposed to be like cat ears or something?
I could not figure this out, but in my research, they did many things wrong with the CueCat, okay? And we're going to get into some of the real businessy side of this. But as I was researching this, I kept thinking to myself, if this product had made it, what you have at the front of your product is a giant frowny face emoticon. Why would you do that? Because it's the colon for the eyes, and then the C, the capital C, is just a giant mouth that's either a frowny face or a giant maw that's about to eat everyone.
I mean, that's a cat.
I guess so.
They're either disappointed or wanting to murder you.
But CueCat, let's talk about it. It's the year 2000, and the tech industry is consumed by one burning question, Tony. How do we get people to transition from looking at an object in physical media, like a magazine, or maybe even in person at a store, to an online storefront where they could buy that item? Sure, okay? We know that people could sit down at their computer and type out a web address to get to our website. But that's so much work, okay? You have to walk
into... It really
into...
is, especially like typing HTTP and all that like you used to have to.
You had to push each one of those individual keys, and that's not even counting... Okay, considering the amount of time that it takes, all right, that's just one thing. But then there's the wear on your keyboard from typing in all these web addresses. It's so cumbersome.
I know. How are you supposed to remember, like, AOL.com?
Somebody needed to solve this problem, Tony. And the Digital Convergence Corporation thought they had the answer. Barcodes! And you can see how this is not the worst idea ever, right? What could be more convenient than a barcode? There's no messy typing to deal with. You just swipe and scan. I mean, stores have been doing it for years and years now. It's obviously a really good time-saving idea if you have a lot of things to scan, and why not apply it to the home market as well? So the way this was supposed to work was you would open up a printed catalog, which, I mean, we all know that those are still around, Tony, that people just buy things out of printed catalogs and definitely don't just go shop directly online anymore.
I mean, my mom does. She gets those like Finger Hut catalogs.
I'm being a little facetious, but it seems like that they were thinking a little bit big about a small problem. You would see a product in one of these catalogs, and sure, it would have an address where you could type in to go and buy it, but it would also have this little barcode. Now, I'm saying barcode for the purposes of simplicity, Tony. This was not actually a barcode. A barcode is a copyrighted thing. The way that barcodes work is patented, and you can't just use any barcode that you want to. They had a different proprietary thing, and they made it look different by having slanting bars. But it works the same way. It's white and dark, and the light bounces off of them and gets information to the computer. It's the same concept. It just was not technically a barcode.
So it's kind of... Is that why QR codes have to be square and different? Because it's not that proprietary technology?
Possibly. I think it also allows them to contain more information.
Probably.
So, you might be thinking, okay, finally, I don't have to type things into my computer anymore. Yes, this does sound like the utopian future of jetpacks and robots I was always imagining, but how am I going to scan these codes in without a barcode scanner in my home? Okay, great, you've printed a barcode in this magazine. I'm just Joe Schmo. I don't have a barcode scanner. To which Digital Convergence said, we got your back, fam. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a barcode scanner. Not just any barcode scanner, a barcode scanner in the shape of a cat.
I mean, that's the internet in a nutshell. Just make everything a cat and it'll go better.
Of all the ideas that they had that were bad, this is not one of them. I think that this is actually a relatively charming design. This was a scanner that you would plug into your computer, into your PS2 port, because USB wasn't really a thing at the time. And you would scan one of their proprietary slanted barcodes, and that would route you with their proprietary software through their service that would point you to the web address that the person who made the barcode wanted you to go to. Here's the thing though. You got this product, it's a cat scanner, it makes things slightly easier to buy online, but it's not like people are gonna rush out to their local Target and buy up all of these cat scanners off the shelves because they look like cats and start scanning things in their magazines. People aren't that interested in the simplicity of ordering, so they decided to adopt the AOL approach.
Where they just, like, shotgun thousands of them out?
Millions.
Millions?
Millions of CueCats were built, and many of them were shipped. And the rationale here makes some sense, right? Okay, you've got this thing in the mail. It's a physical piece of hardware that someone has sent you without you asking for it. It's pretty cool. They sent this out to the subscribers to Wired and Forbes, and people could go into Radio Shack and buy one or pick one up for free. All these companies were invested pretty heavily in this technology, and you would have your little CueCat that you could scan things into your computer with and get to whatever website they wanted you to go to. The initial outlay for this company, the Digital Convergence Company, and their plan to unify all of online buying into this one barcode, the investment in it was $185 million.
Cool.
It came from a lot of different companies, most notably Coca-Cola and Radio Shack, but you can see why they would want to get in on the ground floor of this potentially commerce-altering idea. And so they started showing up in people's mailboxes. The problems, however, cropped up almost immediately after shipping. First, even at the low price of free, the CueCat was hardly worth using. As we've already mentioned, it's not that difficult to type in a web address. It didn't have a wireless function. There was no sort of idea that you could link this up with your phone at the time. So you still had to walk into your office or your den or wherever you had your computer and pull this thing out from behind where it had fallen because you hadn't used it that often, probably if you weren't that big of a shopper, and scan the code.
Yeah, right after you untangle like 4 feet of cabling because it just decided to do that in your desk. Probably even more so because it's a cat.
There were people working on a way to get this done from a mobile device. I read a very interesting quote from a guy who believed that cell phones would have barcode scanners in them, and I don't think he meant with the camera. There was not specific, but I just envisioned this guy who sold barcode scanners thinking like, we're going to get some of these things in there. They're going to be scanning all kinds of stuff with their cell phones. Almost came true, but not quite the way he was envisioning. And so, because this was essentially solving a problem that nobody actually had, it got lambasted in the tech news of the time, and very few people were using it. But the second problem, and probably much larger from Digital Convergence's standpoint, was that almost immediately after shipping these little scanners, hackers cracked the proprietary encryption that made you go through their website and made it work just like a regular barcode scanner that would hook up to your computer.
So any sort of referral money that they were going to get wouldn't be there anymore?
That's correct. People set up open source links. You could scan the back of your books and go directly to the Amazon website for that book. And their concern was maybe the publisher of that book didn't want you to go to that Amazon website. Maybe they wanted you to go through Barnes & Noble or through a special splash page that had a video or something. And they didn't have control of that anymore. Or you could just use it as a scanner. You could just scan your library of books that you had or whatever other thing you had that had UPCs on it.
The only experience I had using these was during a school project where kind of nerdy kid had turned it into a barcode scanner for security purposes, where we would scan people's badges for a special project to make sure that they were on shift and everything. So he was definitely one of those kids that used the open source version.
So you can see the issue, though. Digital Convergence isn't just dealing with the product that no one wants to use. Now they have a product that's out of their control. If the whole point was that they could specify where these proprietary barcodes would go, the fact that these guys cracked the encryption almost immediately and made it so you could scan any barcode just makes the whole product completely pointless. The business model is gone.
I just want to say that this was probably one of the most predictable things that could ever happen. If you gave everybody a free device, people are going to figure out how to crack it and use it for their own reasons.
Well, the interesting thing was they threatened to sue these sites that were distributing this cat cracking code, for lack of a better term. And despite the fact that they didn't have any real legal leg to stand on, the sites did kind of back down. The open source nature of this sort of went into back channels. It wasn't quite so easy to find for a while. And you can see how the legal argument for the hackers would go. It's like, you guys sent us this thing for free. We didn't even want it. It just showed up in our mail. How can you then say that you have some kind of end user agreement from us that we're going to use it as you intended?
Yeah, it reminds me of whenever they tried to make it so you couldn't unlock cell phones. Because it's like, oh, this belongs to this company and you shouldn't be able to use it on other ones. It's like, you own the device. You should be able to do whatever you want with it once you own it.
But even there, you probably signed a bunch of paperwork when you got the cell phone, like you paid them. There was an agreement there. It might have been an unreasonable agreement, but at least you could have known what you were getting into with the cell phone. In this, people were just like, I want to use this thing that you gave me. Why can't I use it the way I want to use it? You didn't put that good of encryption on it. It didn't take him that long. It wasn't like some genius level hacker who like stayed up all night smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee and finally broke through. It's like, oh, you guys, okay, we get it. Just
let's not assume that that's not how it happened. I mean, that sounds like a pretty plausible story.
That's a more fun story.
Yeah.
As if the initial failures weren't bad enough, Tony, in September of 2000, there was a breach of customer data on the CueCat servers. And 140,000 users lost their personal information to whatever hackers had decided they were worth hacking into. Probably some of these guys that got sued, honestly, decided to do a little retaliation. I don't know for sure. That just seems plausible to me.
That it does. I'm trying to think of what it would have been like, how much scarier it would have been before people had data breaches before. Because this is the late 90s, early 2000s. And now it's almost common where it's like, oh, Sony got their servers hacked. You better change all your passwords and cancel your credit cards. This is back when people were just starting to embrace e-commerce.
And you can see from the types of information they got, again, what the vision for the business model is like. Because when you register for the service, they're asking for things like, how old are you? What is your gender? Where do you live? They're looking for the kinds of data that Google sells now to advertisers, hoping to be able to specify where things go. If they had been able to say, okay, people in Topeka, Kansas really enjoy buying honey out of this particular catalog, that could have been a potentially really valuable service. It just did not work the way they thought it was going to work. After the hack, they tried to patch up the problem by offering a $10 Radio Shack gift card to all those affected, but really the writing was on the wall at this point. The hack was just another nail in the coffin of an already dead idea. Digital Convergence tried to negotiate a cash infusion from new investors after this, and they were on the way to maybe propping themselves up for a few more years when 9/11 happened. And markets went crazy. All of the investors that they had interested, at least tentatively, in their terrible idea, decided that they had better priorities for what cash they had left and pulled out, and Digital Convergence went under for good. They slipped into bankruptcy and they disappeared from the face of the earth, Tony. But that's not the end of the story, though, because as you alluded to already, even though the company was gone, they still had literally millions of these devices, these CueCats that functioned as barcode scanners. And that, with a little bit of modding that had already been demonstrated within the usefulness of the CueCat, could be turned into just a regular old barcode scanner for any barcode you had lying around. And so the liquidator who was in charge of this bankruptcy sale bought 2 million of these scanners for a penny a piece, and then turned around and listed them for sale at 30 cents a piece if you bought 500,000 or more. Which, of all the people in this story,
good translation.
That guy's making some money. I don't know exactly how that works out. I'm sure it has to go back to the creditors because of how bankruptcy works, but that's a pretty good switcheroo, I would say.
Yeah.
And they're still in use today. That you can go on eBay or on Amazon right now and buy a CueCat. You could probably buy one new in the package still. People still use them to catalog things. You mentioned, Tony, that you guys used them for barcodes on badges to scan in and out like you'd scan in and out of work. And it's a joy to me that this terrible, terrible idea failed and the hackers and the cat-shaped scanners won the day in the end.
They usually do, sadly.
Well, more often the hackers than the cat-shaped scanners, but maybe we need more of the one and less of the other. Anyway, that's going to do it for this week. Thank you guys so much for listening.
We'd like to thank Lindsay, our friend at Geek Girl Co. on Twitter, for sending in this suggestion. If you have suggestions for the show, hit us up at Human Echoes or badideasshow@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Human Echoes. Starting at $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month, you can get all sorts of cool things, the bonus podcast, early releases, pins, postcards, all sorts of cool stuff.
And don't forget to tell a friend if you like this as well. That is just huge for us if you share the word.
Yep. Hope you guys have an excellent day.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.